well, here's a test, and you don't want to do this stupidly. If you think that you should do something, and you think that the reason you might not be doing it is because you're afraid, then you should do it. So that way you can find out if it's fear. Well, how do I know my conscience isn't just masquerading as fear, saying, well, you shouldn't do that, but it's rationalizing the real issue, which is you're afraid of doing that. Here's a reason that you want to tell the truth. And I kind of figured this out when I was looking deeply into the Pinocchio story. You know, in Pinocchio, as Pinocchio strives to become real, he has a conscience to guide him, but it's Jiminy Cricket, this insect. But Jiminy isn't really a very good conscience. He's a bit dogmatic to begin with, dogmatic and inexperienced. So it's not like the conscience is an unerring guide. It's like a partner in discovery. And as you move forward in your life and you consult your conscience and you listen to it, then it gets smarter, and so do you. But there's a coda there. And this is why I've suggested, part of the reason why I've suggested so frequently in my lectures, that people try not to lie. You see, there are many systems. You have many systems within, let's say, that guide you. And one of those is your capacity for rational thought. And then you have a variety of emotional systems and motivational systems and internal dramas and intuitions and bodily sensations, like lots and lots of, and senses, lots of systems that are guiding you. And many of them operate unconsciously, autonomously, instinctively, implicitly, all of that. Nonetheless, you program them, like you feed them content, let's say. Just like you feed your body nourishment, you feed them content. And a lot of the content that you feed them pertains directly to your voluntary thoughts and speech and your actions. And then if you pathologize those by lying, so if you say things that you know not to be true, or you don't say things that you know to be true when you need to, which is more common, and if you act in ways that you consider reprehensible, then you pathologize all of those autonomous systems that guide you. It's like you're programming them badly. You're building an AI system inside yourself, really, and in some sense that is what you're doing, that has very bad training data. And so the output it produces won't guide you properly. And so you don't want to pathologize your guidance systems. It's a really bad idea. So that's why you have to not lie. And maybe that's also why you have to say what you have to say. And you have to say it clearly as well. And you have to learn how to do that. That's one of the ways of getting your conscience straightened out. And then you have to have a dialogue with your conscience. Should I do this or should I not do this? So let's say you're thinking, should I not do this in the case of a temptation? Maybe you have a chance to develop a new relationship, and you're excited about it and apprehensive about it and afraid of it. And you don't know how to sort out all those feelings. And the first thing is you really have to want to sort them out. That's why you have to orient yourself to something that's a genuine up, the star above the horizon. You have to really want things to be straight, and you have to have thought that through, and you have to know what it means for things not to be straight, and really what it means is that you're headed for hell in one way or another. And if you understand that, maybe it's enough to scare you straight. You really got to think that through. Then you got to think about how much better it would be if you aimed up, and that really has to kind of permeate your whole being. And so then you're oriented that way. You're oriented up, and you're deciding that it's okay to try to tell the truth. And then you can start to rely on this dialogue with your conscience. But both of you have to learn, and you're going to make mistakes along the way. That's okay. You can say, well, I'm going to try this without being certain that it's right. You can even say, I'm going to say this without being certain that it's correct. Like if you're arguing with your wife or your husband or your sister or your father, and you have an idea about what might be going on, you can say, look, here's my idea about what's going on. Who knows what that idea might be contaminated with? Like maybe I'm putting it forward just because I'm too proud or arrogant or angry or fearful or whatever. That's possible. Let's see if we can figure that out. But you can offer it tentatively and both have at it. That's what you do if it's a hypothesis, right? You both have at it and see if it's an idea that's worthy of keeping. You do that with your conscience, and then you move forward. There's a technique in behavioral psychology called psychotherapy called collaborative empiricism. So let's say that you and I have been sitting down and we decide that you're going to try something new this week. Like maybe you're agoraphobic and you're having a hard time in a parking lot. And so getting out of the car and going to the grocery store. So maybe we say, well, you're going to drive to the grocery store and you're just going to walk halfway from your car to the door. And that's good enough do that every second day for a week. And then come back and let's talk about it. So that's collaborative empiricism. You're running a little experiment. So you think, well, your conscience is guiding you towards something. You take a tentative step in that direction. And then you check and see, well, Did what I wanted to have happen occur as an outcome? That's the crucial question. And that's the crucial question for behavioral truth, right? That's the pragmatic perspective. Did what I want to have happen as a consequence of my framework of interpretation and my action? If the answer is yes, then I have not invalidated it, right? That's the pragmatic philosophy in a nutshell, and it's very, very smart. So you have a dialogue with your conscience that never ends, and hopefully it gets wiser, and you get wiser. That's the dialogue that Jung talked about between the conscious and the unconscious, between your fantasy life, say, the life that's sort of underneath you as a conscious being, like the life that's part of your biological platform, the biological platform that somehow miraculously gives rise to your consciousness. You have a dialogue with that. We're always in dialogue. We're always in dialogue, right, with everything. And the Logos is embodied in the figure of Christ. So there's this idea in John that whatever Christ is, the Son of God, is not only instantiated in history, but also something eternal that exists up outside of time and space that was there right at the beginning. What that Logos represents is something like modern people. It's something like what modern people refer to when they talk about consciousness. It's something like that. It's more than that. It's like consciousness and its capacity to be aware and its capacity to communicate. It's something like that. And there's an idea underneath that, which is that being, especially from a phenomenological perspective, so the being that is experience cannot exist without consciousness. It's like consciousness shines a light on things to bring it into being. Because without consciousness, what is there? No one experiences anything. It's like, is there anything when no one experiences anything? That's the question. And even God himself cannot get rid of the snakes in the garden. And partly what that means is that, you know, the garden is a conceptual system. It's the conceptual system within which people exist. That's Eden is a walled garden. Paradise means walled garden. And it's walled because a walled garden is where people live. Because the wall is culture and the garden is nature. And we always live in a structure that's an amalgam of nature and culture. So we set it up so it's paradisal, as long as we're unconscious. But we can't manage it because there's always something chaotic that's coming in that we will interact with. That's human beings. You put a snake in the garden, it's the first bloody thing we're going to talk to. And for better or worse, it makes us conscious and awake. It makes us aware of our mortality. It does all sorts of terrible things to us. But it doesn't matter because that's the path that human beings have, what, chosen? Anyways, what it seems to me is the idea that God used the word to extract order out of, habitable order out of chaos at the beginning of time, which is roughly the right way of thinking about it, seems to me deeply allied with the idea that what it is that we do as human beings is encounter something like a formless and potential chaos. I mean, we're not omniscient, obviously, and we can't just do whatever we want, but we encounter a formless and chaotic potential. That's always what we're grappling with. And somehow we use our consciousness to give that form. And this is how people act. Like if you look at how they regard themselves, it's how they act. Because you say things to people like, well, you should live up to your potential. And you make a case that there's something about a person that's more than what is, that yet could be if only they participated in the process properly. And everyone knows what that means, and no one acts like a mystery has been uttered when you say that. And you know, you can see a situation in your own life that's full of potential. You're often extremely excited when you encounter something that's full of potential, because what you see is something that could be. You see a future beckoning for you that could be if only you interacted with it properly. And it activates your nervous system, right, in a very basic way. And we even understand how that happens to the degree that we understand how the nervous system works, because the systems that mediate positive emotion, which are, that responds to potential, which is the possibility of accruing something new and valuable. It responds to potential with active movement forward and engagement. And so we're engaged in the world as potential, and it looks like consciousness does that. And when you encounter the world, you encounter it with a cognitive structure that already has shape. And so it's already in you, this structure. And without that a priori structure, you wouldn't be able to take the formless potential and give it structure. As far in time as you can go, the notion of a structure. And then the idea of a consciousness that is is the tool of that structure and that interacts with the world and gives it. You know, it took us a long time to figure out the word consciousness. Who knows how many thousands of years, or who knows what struggles we had to undertake to abstract out something like consciousness and how we had to represent that dramatically, say, or symbolically, or in a dreamlike fashion before we could actually formulate the term and localize that to some degree in people. It's very sophisticated.